Tracee Bentley, President and CEO of the Permian Strategic Partnership.
Thank you very much for joining us here today. And reason for the visit is in regards to the Permian Strategic Partnership recently came out with a study that is something I believe everybody in the oil and gas industry should probably look at, whether you're doing any sort of drilling in the Marcellus or the Bakken. The Permian, I've read reports where upwards of 60 to 70% is where the majority of the drilling is going to be for the next 20 years. Whether that's true or false, I trust the reports that I read by people like Tracee Bentley, where they put a lot of time and effort into these reports. I'm not saying your report has said that, but I have read reports in the past that the Permian is very prolific and the majority of the nation's drilling is going to come out of there for the next 20 to 30 years. Just wanted to preface a little bit about kind of what's happening down there before we get into the interview and talk about the study that you did as people are preparing for 2021 after an unpredictable 2020 coming off of a very unpredictable 2019, which was very difficult at the end of the year as well. So first of all, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
How are you finding things there in the Permian? I don't believe I've talked to you since you've gone down there. I spoke to you a couple times when you were in Colorado. So my headshot of you is from your days in Colorado. So I may have to update that as well. But how are things down in the Permian?
Things are very well in the Permian. The Permian Basin is home to some of the most resilient, positive, forward-looking people, I would suggest, that anywhere in the country. And so the can-do spirit down here is alive and well. And as you just pointed out or alluded to earlier, Jason, we do know that when oil recovers at a healthy level and we start to see more production, we know that the Permian Basin is going to be the first energy basin to see that level of production and to see more activity. So we're cautiously optimistic.
Well, from the reports I've read, not only are you guys going to be the first ones to get the kind of the spike back, but it sounds like you'll be the last one to turn the lights off too, meaning that there's quite a bit there for drillers. Where up in my neck of the woods, the Bakken, that kind of shocked people with the quick drop off and how quickly the extraction harvest period was. I think they thought it would be a little bit longer than what it came into, and of course, there's the refracs that they're trying to figure out how to extract more and more every day, which they will when the technology increases. But right now, it's doing what it's doing. You mentioned that the technology down there, at least you alluded to it. How is the technology integrating into the Permian down there?
It's amazing. It's constantly changing. Just when you think you've seen the newest and the best, our companies are innovating, and there's a new piece of equipment that will further decrease emissions or that will save or conserve water. I mean, it's truly amazing. And if you blink, you'll miss something. So it's exciting.
Talk to me about this report that you recently put out regarding the Permian Basin, the strategic partnership, Permian Strategic Partnership. Tracee Bentley on the line with us. It talked about, I guess, the number 92 billion barrels proven oil reserves. And I'm just looking at the kind of the brief here, and it says U.S. household energy needs for the next 60 years. So I'm looking at this, and I guess some of the preview I did before about how it really seems like the Permian is going to be kind of that safe investment for a lot of different oil companies to have a core or a base, if you will. Talk to me about some of the specifics that the Permian Strategic Partnership, that study that it found in terms of what some of the highlights were, the takeaways, if you will.
Absolutely. If I could, Jason, though, I think it's important for your listeners to understand why we did this study in the first place. So as you pointed out, we know living here, and those familiar with the industry know that the Permian is in fact the largest, most prolific and secure is very important here, energy region in the entire world, not just the United States, but in the world. And so the importance that it has, not only to Texas and New Mexico, but to the country and to the world, is astounding. And trying to help people understand this is part of PSP's mission. And so we speak with decision makers and leaders at the local, state, and federal levels, trying to explain to them that their policy decisions, whether it's a new law or a new regulation, and oftentimes though it's investment opportunities in the Permian that could impact us for years and decades and 100 years to come by the decisions that we're making today. And so they're intrigued by this, and they say, okay, well, show us numbers and show us current data. And so we decided that it was time to pull together an economic assessment of the Permian. And so we did, and it's brand new release. It's just a couple of weeks old, and it's called The Permian Basin, Unlocking the Full Potential. And by the way, you can find the full report at permianpartnership.org for those who want to see it. And it's not long. It's an easy read, lots of good data in there. It's probably 50 pages or so. But what we found is that the Permian contains an enormous untapped potential. And thanks to its vast reserves, it will remain an energy epicenter and source of energy security for decades to come. We also, in the report, we do discuss wind and solar, as West Texas does have a lot of wind and solar, and we talk about the importance of partnering that with natural gas especially, but with oil down here. And we know that, as I alluded to before, infrastructure investments in the Permian are necessary if we're going to unlock the region's full potential. And so helping, again, people sitting in Washington, D.C. and in Santa Fe and in Austin understand that with some investment, we can and we will unlock the full potential.
When you say infrastructure investment, specifically, are you talking about roads, pipelines? What specifically are you talking about?
Oh, we're really talking about all of it. But in particular, under PSP's leadership, we are very honed in on roads because our roads are severely outdated. Our transportation system in the Permian was really built at a time when agriculture was a main part of the economy. And of course, it still is a main part of the economy, but the infrastructure reflects an agricultural-based society where, lots of farm trucks and tractors, and it's just incredibly outdated. Not only is it outdated physically, but to safely transport the amount of goods and people that call the Permian home right now, it's just not equipped for that. So we have been working very closely with the Department of Transportation in the state of New Mexico, the Department of Transportation in the state of Texas, and the United States Department of Transportation in the past couple of years. And I'm thrilled to say that the Permian has received 3 build grants over the past 2 years. In fact, we just received one last week to the tune of $25 million for a badly needed section of I-20. That's very critical to getting our goods to market. And certainly the state of Texas and New Mexico have been great partners. The state of Texas just recently reconfirmed $660 million dedicated to Permian roads and roads repairs. So we are thrilled about the progress we're making, but we have a lot more to do.
That seems to be pretty thematic with a lot of different shale plays, is the roads. Pipelines are always an issue, of course, but it seems like in the last 3-4 years, or even 10 years, I guess, roads have been very much under the spotlight, at least that I've seen. Up in the Bakken, where I saw firsthand, a lot of these roads, before this shale play took off, maybe had about 20 combine trips a year down a lot of these roads. There was not a lot of activity, and so accordingly, these roads were not taken care of over the years. So a lot of those resources went into the suburbs, went into the cities. And now that it is time for some of these roads, because like I said, up in the Bakken, we've got a different soil up there. And so down where you're at with flash floods, you could probably somewhat relate to this, but it's not unusual during a rainstorm with some of the activity out there for a section of road just to wash off because it did not have the, I don't know, rebar code. I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about now, but some sort of holding together of the road when a flash flood comes. You know what I mean? It's like these, you mentioned it's ag, and that got me thinking, like a lot of the roads built in North Dakota literally were built for about 20 combine trips a year down that road. So has that ever come up about the just, the amount of money that's gone to, you mentioned Austin, and so that got me thinking of the rural and urban lifestyles and resources, to where really, at least in North Dakota, I mean, one could argue that the lion's share of road resources really did go to the urban areas over the last 50 years versus, some of these rural areas that really do need it now because these roads are 30, 40, 50 years old.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that that's happened time and time again. And when you have a very small percentage of the state's population living in an area in a rural part of Texas and New Mexico, i.e. the Permian, and the vast majority, upwards of 90% of the population, is on the other side of the state, you can see how very quickly where the resources are going to go. But that's exactly one of the main reasons for this report, is to let those folks know that, listen, we've got to do a better job keeping up with investment in the Permian, because it's true. While we do have a lesser population, we are still growing at a rate. I think we're one of the fastest growing regions in the country. Even with the downturn, this area has seen growth that I don't think anybody saw coming. And it's bringing a lot of families here, a lot of talent, not only in our industry, but in other industries too. And so if we don't have the infrastructure to sustain that, guess what? First of all, it's a safety issue. So that we know from the Department of Transportation that the Permian Basin has some of the most deadly roads of anywhere in the country. We average a fatality per day. That is absolutely unacceptable, and we need to do better. But the second part of it is an economic story. If we don't have the infrastructure to get the energy to where it needs to go efficiently and safely, that impacts everybody's pocketbook. And we know that it's avoidable. So there's an economic case to be made and a safety case to be made. And I will say the Texas Department of Transportation is a great example. They understood that case and said, you're right. We need to make some significant investments if all of these things are to come together.
Looking at the Permian Basin, I do get somewhat confused in terms of the Delaware, the Wolfcamp, the Permian. I understand the Haynesville, and I believe I understand the Eagle Ford. But when it comes to the Delaware and the Midland Basin and some of these others, what is kind of included in the Permian? Is that a dumb question for somebody like myself?
No, I think but you got it right. Right, we've got the Midland and the Delaware basins that comprise, and there's actually a really neat graphic. I need to find it for you, that somebody showed me at one time. That it's a 3D graphic that shows all the different subbasins that are within the Permian, and it's kind of neat to see the depth and the different formations, and it explains a lot on why production is happening where it's at. Let's see if we can find that for you. I thought at one time we had it on our website, but anyway, it's a very helpful tool.
Well, you sort of mentioned New Mexico, and I forget that it does bleed into New Mexico at times, much like in the Bakken bleeds into Montana and into Canada. But how far into New Mexico does the Permian go? Because I know that there's, like you say, the Delaware, and then if my memory serves me correct, there's a Diablo. Something, no, that's more in the south. There's one above the Diablo platform shelf type of a thing too. So what are the outlying areas in terms of New Mexico? And then I think El Paso is pretty much on the Texas side, isn't it, in terms of a little bit before El Paso in terms of the Permian?
Yeah, so primarily the two counties that we include when we talk about the Permian Basin in Mexico are Lee and Eddy. And those are the very southeastern two counties of New Mexico. And that is where well over 90%, 95% of oil and gas production happens for the state of New Mexico. Of course, there's some north in the Farmington area, but those are definitely the two highest producing counties, not only in New Mexico, but in the country. Those two counties often rank, and here certainly have recently in the top 3 or 4 when it comes to production levels. And so they are incredibly important economically to the viability of the Permian.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's where I was going with my line of question is, I wanted to ask you, I didn't know how qualified you were to speak on New Mexico. We had talked about Texas a little bit, and of course, people think of Texas when they think of Permian. And the New Mexico part of it, there's only 2 counties, yet it drills that much, or extracts that much, it harvests that much. In your study, did it kind of relate like to state governments, county governments, local governments in terms of schools, roads, et cetera, et cetera? Because, man, it just seems like those 2 counties really pump out a lot of revenue for the state of New Mexico.
Oh, my goodness, yes. And we spend quite a bit of time talking about that in the study. But long and short, I believe that the oil and gas industry is about a third or 30% of the budget for the state of New Mexico. So it is significant. And the funding that goes towards schools, roads, healthcare, I mean, all kinds of things that, quite frankly, I don't know how they would fill that gap if not for the oil and gas production in the state. And I also believe that the governor certainly understands this, and as well as decision makers. So, when you have that significant contribution to a state's economy coming out of primarily two counties, every single decision matters, and making sure that, of course, energy is developed responsibly. But boy, creating artificial barriers to energy production will absolutely, make or break an industry that's in charge of so much for the economy there. So it's a very delicate balance, for sure.
A few years ago, you were in Colorado, if my memory serves me correctly. Went to the Permian, and that's like 2 different worlds. You were leaving one world as they were starting to try to ban as much oil and gas activity as they could, and you were going into an area where it seemed like they were pretty oil and gas friendly down in Texas and in those particular counties down in New Mexico. Was it noticeable, or were you so involved in the oil and gas industry that you didn't notice anything in Colorado?
Oh, no, it's incredibly noticeable. I will say that it's refreshing to come to an area and work in 2 states to understand the importance of an industry and everything that it means to the economy, and doesn't let philosophical differences get in the way of people living, healthy economic lives. And it really does boil down to that. It's safe and affordable, clean energy that Americans need. And so it was incredibly noticeable. And I will say that what's going on in Colorado now is it genuinely makes me so sad. I was born and raised 5th generation Coloradan, and to see the decisions that are being made so haphazardly and so irresponsibly when it comes to just constant rulemaking and constant regulation on an industry that has time and time again stepped up to the table and said, we can do that, we can innovate. It really makes me sad. And it doesn't only make me sad because I grew up there knowing that energy is a huge piece of the puzzle, and it has coalesced with other industries and with the population for the history of Colorado. And to suggest that can't continue to happen is false. But watching what it's doing to the economy and to people's jobs in Colorado is absolutely heart-wrenching. Many of them are my friends, and watching them, their companies pull out of Colorado because they can't afford to produce there anymore because the regulations are becoming so burdensome, is heartbreaking. And I often tell people, Jason, that in the Permian that we can't get too comfortable down here, because there's a push by the hydrocarbon folks out there to shut down places like the Permian, just like they're trying to do in Colorado. And so we have to be alert, eyes wide open, and the Balkan too. I know that you all know this up there, but not get too comfortable and be aware that those viewpoints are everywhere. And so making sure that we make good decisions when it comes to voting and to who we're going to put in charge of our decisions is never been more important than now.
I'm going to tell you a little story that I've been observing over the last 10 years or so. I was part of a news organization. We won 2 national awards over the course of 3 years. Well, we have a lot of floods. When you have floods, you tend to win awards. But we also had a very good news team. And during the news segment, during those years, there a smoking ban was going on. A lot of restaurants were getting kind of pushed into having a smoking ban. And whether it's right or wrong or the politics behind it, that's not where I'm going with it. The way I'm going with it was kind of the public health angle. And when I saw what Colorado was doing 5-6 years ago, I started talking about that on this program. And to see how it's been going on, I've seen a lot of change happen in the image of oil and gas. I've seen a lot of happen with the, overlooking of oil and gas. It's very different is what I'm getting at. It's a very different challenge that we're up against. By I mean just people trying to have a civil conversation, to be perfectly honest. What kind of looking back, what kind of advice would you have, or what kind of words might you have for people that are either in the state government in Colorado, or maybe people in the industry? Just you're a leader in the industry, and you have firsthand knowledge of what it was like in Colorado, in the lion's den, so to speak. And now you're in the Permian, where, hey, this is like pinnacle, top of the world. We're definitely a leader in the United States, if not the world. When I look at the question I just asked you, the message we've been trying to preach, we've asked the governor of Colorado to come on our program probably 3 times. He's turned us down. But we've asked him to come on because one of our missions, one of our core missions is inclusion. We always want to include outsiders. That's why we go and we help people plant trees, and we help people pick up. We've adopted a highways, and that sort of thing. We've done a lot of these things that are quote unquote environmentalists. But we just do it because we enjoy it, and we know that's where everybody's going anyways. So, inclusion, hope, service, awareness, that's kind of the message I try to give to people in the oil and gas industry, whether you're in industry or government, because we're working with a company right now, we are energyunited.com. And they're looking at ways to bring all the different energies together because, well, BP and Shell and all these guys 5-6 years ago started running, all the above. They started getting down that path back then as well. So I really spoke a lot longer than I anticipated on this question because actually I didn't want to put you on the spot by saying, hey, what advice do you got for Colorado people? Like some sort of gotcha question. That's why I kind of editorialized a little bit to let you know that, there is a real issue here, but I also think there's a solution. So looking at your crystal ball, what kind of advice would you give to people in Colorado?
Well, especially to decision makers who are in charge of regulating this industry. I have said it numerous times, and I'll say it again, that we can't let philosophical differences get in the way of making good, sound decisions that are good for the economy and good for the overall health of the state of Colorado. I understand there are people out there who, on principle, don't like fossil fuels. I understand that. However, when you let that philosophical view stand in the way of a good, healthy economy, of affordable energy that not only Coloradans need, the entire country needs and have come to rely on, and all the jobs and all of the infrastructure like roads and schools and, emergency services that have really come to depend on the taxes from that industry. So because of a philosophical difference, decide to pull the plug on all that, I would suggest that is wildly, wildly irresponsible. Think about if everybody did that to every industry they didn't like. Some people, there are all kinds of different tastes out there, but that doesn't mean that you go sink an industry and everything that goes with it. I have found it hard to believe that people make decisions that way, and apparently some do, but I think having a broader view of the overall health of a state's economy and the country's economy, those are good leaders to me, and I think we need more of them.
Last summer, I spoke on a panel with Colorado Oil and Gas Association, and Senator Cook, he was there, the old sheriff. And then
I love Senator Cook. He's one of my favorites.
And then the Wyoming Petroleum Council as well. We sat on a panel in Gillette, Wyoming, and my message was quite clear that the oil and gas industry has got to kind of wake up at what's going on here, because things are changing. And a lot of the stuff that you just mentioned really kind of reiterated what we were talking about last summer, which is the politics have shifted a little bit to where facts and science doesn't really seem to weigh as much as emotion and things along those lines. I remember saying, Colorado will probably move things ahead by just having a picture of a child with a smoke coming out of a oil well. And that's actually what they ended up doing, and because if you know anything about marketing, you know how the tobacco industry,
right.
It's very similar models going back to the public smoking ban, and then of course the public health campaign. And so I see a lot of these trends happening. But what we spoke about last summer was that the oil and gas industry, needs to wake up. It was like a shakeup because of the presidential candidates back then was Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders openly talking about banning fracking. And as somebody from the media, that's an extremely irresponsible thing to report. When 93 to 96% of our daily goods come from petroleum products, and our whole society is based on the flow of energy through fossil fuels at this current time, it's extremely irresponsible for a media to yell fire in a crowded theater. And that's what they're doing, because there was a time when we tried to ban straws, or we tried to push back plastic bags. In Hawaii, California, the coast cities have done a great job with mitigating and reducing the plastic straw through human behavior. And Warren and Sanders came out and just said, nah, let's ban fracking. So let's get rid of straws, let's get rid of plastic bags, and let's just jump right to banning an industry. Well, to me, that's a little bit crazy. That literally is crazy. And so when I see the media report that, and then when I see the rise of PPE products, and I see hypodermic needles and coronavirus vaccines and all these different things that plastics are going to be needed for in order for our civilization to actually get back to work and be healthy and unfearful, it's just very odd to me that the media is still continuing to allow candidates to have a anti-fracking instead of a let's scale back type of a conversation. Does that make sense to you, or am I just being a little bit critical for the media?
No, I think you nailed it. And people say, candidates, I want to ban fracking. Well, I'm convinced they don't really know what fracking is. Fracking is a portion of the process of extraction. So, are they really saying I want to ban oil and gas production, or are they saying I want to ban a portion of the process to where we, extract? So I think there's all kinds of education that needs to go on there if folks are willing to learn about the oil and gas industry and how we get product out of the ground safely. So there's that. But number two, you're right. And if their premise is we want to ban the production of oil and gas, well, that's all kinds of irresponsibility that's happening there. Economically, it would literally devastate complete state economies like New Mexico that we just mentioned. It would severely devastate the state of Texas, Colorado, North Dakota, Oklahoma. I mean, we could go on and on. But as well as this country, you just mentioned all of the things that we have come to rely upon and that really have kept us, the United States, being at the forefront of technology and innovation and progress. When you take that away, I mean, the economy and our way of life is going to follow. And so I think people need to understand, if the premise is that we want to ban oil and gas, well, then we're going to do away with cars and cell phones and makeup and medical devices that save people's lives every day. The world as we know it will come to a screeching halt. I mean, that's what people need to understand. But the second really important part here is when it comes to the security, the national security of this country. We are, for the first time, energy independent, and that means we do not have to rely on hostile countries to give us the energy that we need. That in and of itself is amazing, and we should never go back to becoming reliant on hostile countries who don't think the United States is a good place to be, or like our democracy. Why on earth would we ever want to go back to that? Well, the oil and gas industry and all of our production here, and certainly right here in the Permian Basin, we're the heart of it, has allowed us to be energy independent. So we don't have to make decisions based off of if we're going to get, another country's energy source or not. And that's amazing. And Americans should know that and should demand nothing less from here forward.
Tracee Bentley with us with the Permian Strategic Partnership. They have a brand new study that I personally believe everybody in oil and gas should check out just to find out what's been going on, as well as what is going to happen over the next several years to decades in the Permian, what kind of reserves they have, as well as some of the other information that people in the Permian will want to know. But I'm just talking about people outside the Permian. You might want to check this out as well. I did want to ask you a tough question as we wrap up here, and then we'll transition into a summary of the Permian Basin Unlocking the Full Potential study and report that was recently released by the Permian Strategic Partnership. Now, just by kind of scrolling over it really quickly and looking at a few things over the weekend, it seemed like a pretty dry, factual type of a report. It didn't seem like there was a lot of bells and whistles in terms of you didn't speculate in a lot of areas and you didn't, make up a lot of different things. It seemed like your pretty basic report. Is that fair to say?
Well, I suppose it depends on, what gets you excited or not. I think by and large, you're right. We didn't dress it up on purpose.
So
we wanted it to be very, very factual. And somebody like, I'll speak for myself. I find this stuff very exciting and fascinating, but I understand to those who maybe not in the energy industry how it could come across dry. But I still think anybody, whether you're in this industry or you know much about it or not, I still think it's hard not to be pretty taken aback by some of the facts in this report.
Well, and that's where I was going with this, is that, looking at these numbers is pretty incredible. A lot of the stuff that's happening here. And to me, I think it's a pretty black and white, pretty dry. And I mean that in a good way. Because the question I have for you, I don't know if you know how to answer this. I have absolutely no idea if you know how to answer this at all. But I know you know what I'm talking about, but I don't even know if you know how to answer this. We are entering a world where the word ESG is becoming so common. I talked to a operator earlier in the week, and they're doubling their ESG report for their shareholders from 50 to 100 pages that they're doing to revise it. I don't know how you put that into a report, because it is a mood, it is intangible, it is so new that yet it's so real. I see it. I don't know if you put it in the report or if it was influenced in the report at all, or if you guys talked about that, or if you have an opinion on it or what. But I just feel like it needs to be brought up in some way of a discussionary type of a thing, that it just seems like this ESG score and movement is here. And the energy industry is still trying to figure out how to integrate that into their new way of doing business. Have you had any conversations with anybody about this, or do you kind of know this direction that I'm talking about, or is it not going that way? Or
no, I think by and large you're exactly right. ESG is becoming more and more important to shareholders as time goes on, and I can tell you that I can speak for my 20 companies. They take it very serious, and in many cases go above and beyond the current requirements when it comes to ESG. And honestly, Jason, I think that the Permian Strategic Partnership and the vision that my member companies had to create it. It really goes to the heart of it. So the Permian Strategic Partnership, your listeners should know, we are a coalition of 20 of the country's largest energy companies in the Permian Basin who have come together to work with local leaders and state leaders and federal leaders to improve the quality of life for those residents in the Permian Basin. And we have 5 key research showed that we need to, in order to make the Permian a world-class place to live, we need to focus on 5 areas, and that's roads, which we've spent a lot of time talking about today. It's access to quality healthcare, access to quality education, workforce development, and affordable housing. And those are things that typically the industry hasn't worked on, I'll say. Now, individual companies certainly have, and they know that these 5 elements are key to getting a good trained workforce in any particular area where they're developing. But we've never seen it to this scale. The Permian Basin is very, very large. And to attempt to tackle and partner with folks in our area to address these issues is it's never been done before. But how exciting is that you're seeing an industry put their money where their mouth is and step up and say, if not us, then who? And so I just want to tell you that last year we funded over $30 million in initiatives in those core areas. And we did some amazing things in the world of healthcare, education, roads, and housing. And so I just couldn't be more excited, but I think it's important for folks to know who say that the industry needs to step up and really put their money where their mouth is and do some, very tangible ESG things. Well, I think we are the prime example of that.
How can people get in touch with you? And do you guys take memberships, or is it kind of an invite-only club? Talk to me about, what you guys have going at the Permian Strategic Partnership, if you guys do an annual meeting or anything like that, events. We have the report out, and we'll have a link, of course, to our website, linking it to the report and everything. But go ahead and give your organization a plug and memberships and that sort of thing.
Sure. If you go to permianpartnership.org, you will find our last year review, and it talks about all of the amazing initiatives that we funded last year. It also talks about who we are and which 20 companies, some of which we've spoken about today, are members of the Permian Strategic Partnership. And it talks about a lot about the study, as you will find on there, and some other things that we partnered on at the state and federal level. So it's a very comprehensive, I think, easy read to go to the website and find out more about what we do. On that website, if you all would like to be kept involved on progress that we're making, you can sign up for our newsletter. And so every couple months, we send those who sign up a newsletter to say, hey, here's what we're up to now. Got to keep everybody up to speed. And to your membership question, we are certainly not exclusive. We want any and all energy companies who want to be part and share our vision. We want to visit with you, and we think that there's no magic number. Those who want to invest with us in the Permian Basin, in our 5 core areas, absolutely, we'd love to visit. And there's a space on our website where you can contact us.